we're going to look at the solicitation cycle, the fundraising cycle, the developing donors fundraising cycle. And hopefully all of you have seen this before. Then we're going to go into the solicitation call, preparation, execution, and follow through. And we're going to get into the detailing of what an outstanding, effective solicitation call will look like. So we're going to do an overview in terms of development and fundraising, major gift fundraising. Then we're going to get into the details of how to be the most impactful possible for those major gift calls. And that, I think, these two components, I'm excited about this stuff. I think this stuff is so very, very powerful. It is so very, very powerful. We were able to grow by 375% in 4 years. You might be able to grow by 500% in 4 years, or 1,000%, or 100%. But we're all here to take our organizations to the next level, aren't we? Right? Are you satisfied with where you're at? No. No, we all have ambitions that have our organizations that we're passionate about excel, achieve greater things. That's why we're here. So I think we can learn from even the basics. So we're going to talk about the solicitation cycle, developing donors. We put developing donors there first because this isn't a transactional activity. There's transactions in major gift solicitation. It's all about the donor. As I've said, it's not about me. It's not about us as fundraisers. It's all about the donors. And what our goal is to develop donors over time so we take them through this cycle repeatedly. And the more often you take a donor through that cycle, the more exciting it gets. Because you get to know these donors in unimaginable ways. And you get to come to appreciate, I've gotten to appreciate what phenomenal people these donors are. We focus on this because, I focus on it because it's a simple management tool. Okay, I'm going to go see John Smith today. Now let's see, what's the background on John? Well, he just made a gift, he's in stewardship. Where are we with stewardship? Well, we did this, that, and the other thing for him. But they're still making payments on their gift. It's a multi-year gift. All right, so given that, this is how I'm going to focus my visit with John Smith. Or qualification. We know we want to pursue this person. Okay, what's the best way to go forth with cultivation? So this is just a very simple tool I use all the time. I refer to it constantly. And we're going to look at these piece by piece. And in the middle of the cycle, I've added the word time. Time. We'll talk about time as well. So identification. It's pretty obvious, right? We need to identify donors. How many of you have a body of donors that you've identified and that support your organization? How many of you want to identify more prospective donors for your organization? So we need donors, and we need more donors in order to raise more money. The broader our base of donors, the higher the pyramid can grow over time. So we look at our current donors, and we have to be thoughtful about our current donors, intentional with our current donors, about who we can move forward, how we are to treat and engage them, what we should ask from them next. You know, we rely upon our board members, we rely upon other volunteers. These are people, if they're not donors, we need to approach them as donors. We have other affiliations. Andy Zahn is here. Andy is with the Boy Scouts of America Greater St. Louis Council. He's the Chief Operating Officer. Andy, wave to the crowd, please. And last week, Andy and about 40 other executives of the council were in a couple days of planning, 2-3 days of planning, and they had a module on fundraising and asked me to do that. And what's powerful about the Scouts is the number of volunteers associated and the relatively small percentage of volunteers that support the Scouts with financial support. And of course, there's another huge group of people with resources that the Scouts can approach. Anybody have a guess as to what that might be? Parents. Parents who are entrusting their children to the Boy Scouts to help make these children thrive and do well and grow. What an investment they have, what an extension of trust they have, what an opportunity to engage in gift discussions. You may have alumni, you may have a membership, you may have grateful patients. There might be all kinds of other affiliations that you could think of in terms of your organizations, maybe affiliations you want to establish and create. So we have to think about that in order to grow our body of donors and prospective donors. When you look at major gift donors who are supporting other organizations, look to see if they support organizations like your own. Ellen and I were over at the Art Museum over Christmas, and over at the beautiful Art Museum, two prominent places are these big walls with all these donors who have given extraordinary sums of money. You know what I did? Couldn't help myself. I took out my phone and click, 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 click. Because they're not all UMSL donors. We have activities at our university that are involved in the world of art. Maybe there's some opportunity here we haven't considered. So, again, not rocket science, guys. This is like doing some investigative work. We have one researcher at UMSL, and we're so fortunate to have a researcher at UMSL. But today with Google, today with this kind of stuff, annual reports, you can find out so much about people and what their charitable inclinations are. Another thing is when you're thinking about who you're going to go to for what, is how much have they given to other organizations? Are they a $10 million donor? Are they a $10,000 donor? Are they a $1,000 donor? That is a way to consider. How do we prioritize this person? And so on. Qualification. Here's a question. Why would this prospect be interested in your organization? Well, you're excited about your organization, but what is it that you think would excite this prospect or further excite a donor of yours that they would want to give more, give substantially more? And then we ask ourselves, what's the frequency of their major gift support in the community? This is back to the other point, but can we find out how much they're doing? What frequency? Do they give one major gift? 5 years later you see their name appear somewhere? Or do you see a stream of major gifts? Maybe major gifts to a variety of organizations, which indicates they're open to supporting more organizations, of which you could become one. Qualifications where we ask the question, well, now we're getting to know and understand this person, this couple, this entity, this organization. What would we ask from them when we're ready to? What is it that we would approach them about? For how much? What would the terms be like? We think about these things. Does it have to be cash? Do we need it immediately? Could it be paid over time? Can it be deferred, completely deferred? What is it that we want from this donor? We have to be thinking about. Then we get to, and this gets to how precious time is, how many of you have other responsibilities other than major gift fundraising? I think we all probably have responsibilities beyond major gift fundraising. And so other things are always competing with our time to devote to major gift fundraising. And we have to be disciplined about this. Back to that word relentless. We have to be disciplined about this. We have to be focused. We have to be absolutely committed to raising major gifts. So we carve out time, but the time we carve out, we have to be so strategic about it. So we think about two things. We think about the capacity of the individual, the organization, and we think about their affinity to our organization. Capacity and affinity. Very basic. And if you think of 4 quadrants, you want to be focusing on that quadrant, certainly initially, primarily, that's high capacity and high affinity, and then you go from there. But if you have precious little time, you want to focus on those that, and this could be board members, those who are active volunteers, those who are closer to your organization or that you can access through the support of a volunteer. But capacity and affinity are the two ingredients, as well as locking in your time and being disciplined about using your time. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you freely admitted, and anyone in St. Louis knows, coming into this campaign, you were not an institutional major campaign organization. So how often did you find yourself helping people, training people to make their first major gift?
That's a great question. I'm not going to get emotional about this, but one of the fantastic things about our work at UMSL is that we have been bringing donors, particularly our alumni, to make their first major gifts. Gifts they've never ever contemplated, they've never ever been approached by anyone else to make. And sometimes the shock on their faces and the disbelief. And then what they go through oftentimes, if they're a married couple as spouses working through this request, what this means for their lives, is very, very powerful for them. And when we get to stewardship, we'll talk about that a little bit from a different point of view. But there's nothing more gratifying, I think, as a fundraiser to bring someone into major gift fundraising. It's just absolutely amazing. So it takes hand-holding, it takes persistence, respect, loving regard. We respect them first and foremost, whatever they do for us. And we bring them along. We develop them. We're going to get to other topics that reinforce this too as we go on this morning. Good question. Great question. Okay, let's talk about cultivation. We know who we want to focus on. We've qualified. We think, boy, if we could get in front of them and make the request, this is what we'd want to do. We have to evaluate where we are in terms of the engagement process. So how do we cultivate them? Are we already connected with them? Or do we need to find a way to get to them and to bring them to us? Many of you have probably very powerful, impactful events. Can we bring them to an event? Can we go and visit with them and tell them the story and give them perhaps a literature or materials? Or bring a sample of our work? I went and saw a contractor who had been very supportive of scholarship dollars, and I brought a student that he was underwriting with me. This student was a rock star. I mean, oh my God, a rock star. And it was so interesting how he began giving, it was a younger lady, began giving her advice. And I mean, there was this immediate connection. And we have an annual scholarship event where we try and bring our scholarship donors and students together at tables just like this over a lunch or a dinner and give them an opportunity to see one another. It's just so very, very powerful. So look for those opportunities, design opportunities to bring your organization in a more powerful way in front of your donors and prospective donors. We want to engage people. We want to ask their advice. It's a very powerful thing to do. We want to ask their advice. We want to ask them to volunteer, officially or otherwise. We want to engage them. The more they're engaged, we know this, right? The more people volunteer, the larger their gifts. Volunteers give more money on average. The more we engage them, the more they're going to support us. And this is about relationship building, developing trust. We'll talk more about developing trust as we go along this morning too. So, developing trust. You know, the world turns on trust. The world breaks down with mistrust. We are people that have to be people of great integrity, the best character. We strive to excel at our profession so that we don't waste the time of our donors, our volunteers. We're as focused as possible, representing these incredible missions that we represent. And we focus on those donors and build trust. And trust takes you through every season in a donor's life. Trust sustains it. Building trust, we'll get to this in a little bit, I think sometimes it's more powerful than raising money. If someone says no and you walk away having gained trust, you know money's going to follow. We know money will follow, likely follow. But establishing trust, very powerful. Trust and respect. Solicitation, let's talk about solicitation. You're very patient, I appreciate this. Okay, what solicitation is about, and we talked about this in a way a moment ago, we're donor-centric. We are to be donor-centric in our outlook and how we approach donors. Kind of obvious, kind of basic. It's about the donor. Why? It's the donor's money, right? It's the donor exercising decisions over their resources. It's all about the donor. So as we approach this solicitation, we want to be thinking about what in our organization most closely aligns with the passions, the interests of this donor. Is there a place where we can find perfect alignment or closer alignment? Because the closer the alignment of the donor's passions, and not that you can't introduce and create new passions, we can, but the closer aligned those two are, the greater satisfaction the donor's going to have. And by the donor having greater satisfaction, what does that set up in the future? They want more of it. They want more of that satisfaction. They want more of that experience. And they want it with our organizations because we gave them this great experience. So the closer the alignment, the better. Also, they're more likely to give more if they care more about what we're asking for. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty, like I said, in a few minutes. Let me make another observation. Have you ever had this experience? Someone said, well, yes, I will do. I'll do $50,000 over 5 years for this important cause, Martin. And then it never happens? Anybody ever have that experience? So when someone says yes, whose job isn't finished? Our job's not finished, and the donor's job is not finished. It's not finished till it's documented. We have to close the calls. And frankly, I think closing gifts oftentimes is the most difficult part of it. I've got the luxury that I hand some stuff off to Lyle over here, Lyle Brizendine, our plan giving expert. And he has to arm wrestle them to the ground and get the document signed. I mean, we've got to close the gifts we've reached out to and asked for. We have to follow up persistently. Now, have you ever had somebody, it seems like it's impossible to get to them? And even after they said yes, it's just, how can we ever get this money? They're always traveling. Or they're so busy as executives or whatever. Everybody have that experience? It's the old never, never, never give up. Gee, I left 3 phone messages. Who cares? You're just getting started. You know those pink messages the secretary puts on the executive and that kind of thing? I mean, you want a pile from your organization till finally the donor, she or he says, what the? I've got to clear this mess out of the way. Hello? Let's get this taken care of. They don't, email. We have to close the gift. It's our job. It's hard work. It's perhaps the hardest part of the work, but we've got to get it done. And I tell you what, when it's a hard-fought battle to close a gift and you finally get that gift, is there anything sweeter? That's a wonderful, sweet experience for those of us who do this work. So in the solicitation, there's the transactional dimensions. And oftentimes, gifts can be complicated for donors. Certainly larger gifts, but whatever the gift, it can be complicated for a donor. If it's a large gift for the donor, it's not the size necessarily. In other words, a $5,000 gift can be incredibly complicated for one donor, and a $5 million gift might be incredibly complicated for the next donor. But whatever, if it's a large gift, oftentimes complexity comes with it. Advisors come with it. Family considerations or business considerations come with it. And so they've got a lot on their plate after they said we'll do $50,000 over 5 years. But it's our job to see that that's brought to conclusion. Stewardship. I used to think that solicitation was the most powerful part of this cycle. Why? It's the show me the money, right? It's the thrill of the chase of closing the gift, being able to add it up on my wall, that grand total that I'm tracking every single day. Here's another 50,000, here's another 500,000. All right, we're getting closer. That's exciting. Getting that major gift you never expected from a donor, and there's that document. Oh my God, that's exciting. But what's really exciting is stewardship. What's really exciting is stewardship. Now, what is stewardship? Stewardship is giving thanks, right? We get $1 at UMSL, they get an acknowledgement. They give a significant gift in some of our units, $100, $250, they get a phone call. $500, they might get a phone call and asked to be taken out for lunch. I mean, we value every gift that comes through our door. And we think about it, what's the appropriate response? Larger gifts, sometimes broader kind of recognition. But we think about this carefully, given who the donor is, and our resources, our limited resources in terms of time, money, and so on. Here's what gets complicated. And what you see here is a vertical and horizontal axis. Put publicity vertical, anonymity horizontally. When we think about how we're going to recognize donors, and oftentimes this means being in conversation with the donors, we have these kind of two extremes, you might say. And we need to understand from the donor what they expect. Well, here's two great and very different illustrations for you recently at UMSL. Of course, the Michael Brown tragedy and all that's come through that in Ferguson, just overwhelming, incredibly challenging for our community. And those of you may know that, Emerson sits, that sanctuary, the Emerson campus sits right in the middle of it all. And David Farr, Patrick Sly, and the folks at Emerson wanted to be very responsive. And we were fortunate in that we were part of whom they wanted to partner with, and they made a commitment of $1.5 million over 5 years to create new scholarships for students from Ferguson and from North County more broadly. But they wanted to use this commitment, this new commitment of theirs, in a way that would command attention in the community. So Bob was working with Fleischman Hillard executives because they have the Emerson account. And they were working with Emerson executives. And this was all, choreographed around a press conference and so on with David Farr at the microphone because they wanted to have the greatest impact possible. Pat Sly called me and said, Martin, the giving guide's coming out. We want to work with you to design an ad that shows the partnership and reinforce this announcement. And that's what that ad is. Was there anything wrong with their wanting to emphasize publicity? No, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, it was very purposeful in this case. They don't try and necessarily get large announcements about every gift they give in the community, but this was important for these very, very important reasons to the community. The Normandy Golf Course, anybody golf here? I gave it up years ago, I'm so pathetic. But Normandy Golf Course, you may have read in the paper in the last few weeks, the University of Missouri St. Louis now owns the Normandy Golf Course. And the story is, last May, at one of our Chancellor's Council meetings, and the Chancellor's Council is our foremost advisory group to our Chancellor, to our university, it came up in our Buildings and Grounds Committee that Normandy Golf Course was available at a very reasonable price. This discussion was brought to the larger group, and it happened that President Tim Wolf, the president of our University of Missouri system, happened to be there that day. So he was involved in the discussion. And what was clear is that state money and UMSL wouldn't have any money for this because this is a long-term play. A Normandy Golf Course lines up on our southwestern flank, 118 acres, 120 acres, and something very desirable in terms of the long term, but we don't really need to activate it today. So it was clear it was going to have to be done through other resources. So 3 Chancellor's Council members say, no brainer, and they purchased the option, and they gifted the option to our university. They each put in $75,000 or $25,000 apiece. A donor from our Chancellor's Council membership says, I'm really excited about this. I understand how strategically important this land acquisition is for the long-term growth of the university, but also in terms of protecting the university, because there was this discussion that there was some housing that might be built there if one of the competitors got this golf course that would be perhaps undesirable for our university in the long term. And so it would protect our flank. So he made a commitment of $1.5 million. I don't think this couple had ever given $1.5 million to anybody, let alone in cash. So for our university, $1 million, by the way, is very, very big money. Very big money. And for this donor, believe me, that was very, very, very big money. So I went to meet with the donors to talk about the appropriate kind of recognition. And of course, as a fundraiser, I wanted this all over the papers. I wanted to celebrate it in the most public ways. As long as it had legs, I wanted it to course through the community, because again, it would be one more example of UMSL's worthy of support, and look who's stepping up now to do something extraordinary. But Mr. and Mrs. Donor, in fact, this piece here, Bob's team had put together, and we had, Mr. and Mrs. Donor Historic Park down here in this quadrant. And I took two examples of that to this meeting with them. But their decision was, we don't want it to be public. In fact, the fellow said, after we're dead, Martin, do whatever you want with it. I said, well, I might be dead beforehand. I don't know that I can guarantee it. But they wanted it to be anonymous for a set of reasons, very candid, personal reasons. And they've been public with other gifts. But in this one, they wanted anonymity. And of course, we absolutely are respecting that. And their names will never be publicly associated with it until there comes a time when they might change their minds or go on to that greater place. So when we think about developing donors, we think about stewardship and recognition. These are factors that we have to get to. But why is stewardship the most powerful? Last May, Lyle Brizendine, does everybody know Lyle? Lyle came to the university from a background in banking and finance. He's an expert in plan giving and estate planning. Wanted a second career to give back. He was publicly educated, respects the value of public education, loves it, as does his wife. Came to UMSL. And has been doing great work for us. Well, Lyle's been involved with the St. Louis Plan Giving Council for years. And last May, out at Lindenwood University, the St. Louis Plan Giving Council was having an education day, and at that lunchtime, they recognized Lyle with their Founders Award. And so I wanted to be there. And Linda Carter and I, from the university, went and joined Lyle. And I didn't know that there was going to be a presentation at lunch. And there was a professor from Texas Tech University, Russell James, who spoke. Was anybody there? Okay. A couple of people were there. Russell James. And what he talked about was research that's going on. And one of his points was, and this is to keep it simple, because I'm a simple fellow, I can only absorb so much information, to keep it simple. When someone gives a gift of greater significance, what's released biochemically, I'm not a science major, by the way. I was a theology major, for goodness sake. What's released is the enzyme that's released around family bonding. Grab it. Grab this. Grab this now. It's the enzyme that's released around family bonding. I can't stand my family, but they're always going to be my family. Do you get more intimate than family? So when someone makes these significant gifts, there's this following attachment. So for us as fundraisers, we're not done once we've closed the gift. this stewardship thing. And I used to just watch this happen. You've probably seen this happen. They make a gift and suddenly, God, they're like your best salespeople. They're around all the time. They're all excited and effervescent about your group. Why? Because in making this gift, they've had this corresponding experience of deep, deep connectedness. This is just unbelievably powerful to me. That we are so made that through acts of giving, that's part of the reward we receive, right? How powerful is that? So we as fundraisers, we need to realize this and respect it and nurture it. We've had donors where getting the first major gift just about killed us. I mean, it was like torture. I mean, they demanded everything, and then once we thought it was all done, they wanted to go over the whole thing and change it. Finally, they come to terms, they sign the dotted line, and this happens. So the next time we begin to engage the donor, coming through the cycle again, what I've observed is, not always, but in many cases, their disposition has changed. It's less about them and protecting what they're about to do to ensure that they're going to get what they want to get. And it's more about how I can help my family. What is it you need, Martin? Oh my God, I can understand why the university needs that, why your students need that. Let's see how we can help you. So they've changed emotionally, they've changed attitudinally as they've gone through the cycle. Remember I said earlier, the more you go through the cycle in developing the donors, the more amazing it gets. And that's why. Because this attachment happens, we are brought into their inner circle, as it were. Oftentimes inner circle as advisors. We're respected. You know what? This is, I don't mean to be braggadocious here, but these donors who I've been a part of, we've been a part of and taken through the cycle time and time again, no one's ever said no to me after they've gone through this for a meeting. They always say yes. Now it might take some doing to get the meeting depending on the demands of their lives, but they'll always say yes. Why would they always say yes? Because they had this experience that's beyond measure, far beyond the treasure that they shared with our institution. So, I can't say enough about stewardship. Time. Say something about time, then we're going to take a little break here. Time belongs to the donor. It doesn't belong to us. Oh, I wish it belonged to us. I wish it belonged to us, but time belongs to the donor. It's the donor's money. It's the donor's time. We come in and frankly, oftentimes we know near next to nothing about their circumstances. And they may love our institutions, they may want to help our organizations, but they have very, very complex lives. They may or may not be able to be responsive or to the degree that we hope that they would be. And that's because they have complex lives and gifts take time. Well, I can't do that right now. Maybe we could do that sometime later. I want to be responsive, but we couldn't start that pledge for 3 years because we're fulfilling these other pledges. You know, we've got 2 weddings coming up in the next 9 months. Forget about it, Martin. So they have these complex lives. They own the time, but it's our job representing our organizations to bring the time of our organizations to bear upon these relationships. So annual fundraising. Why do we do annual fundraising? It's to get donors to give annually. And when do they give annually? During the course of our fiscal cycle. And we use this annual thing, and donors become accustomed to, well, I support that organization, I support it annually. They usually ask me in March, we'll be ready to give that gift in March. But we can bring other things to bear. Calendar year end. Anybody use calendar year end to raise more money than otherwise? That's a time that oftentimes donors are making those decisions. Being in front of those donors is important. Fiscal year end. Our fiscal year end is June 30th. And we talk to donors about our fiscal year end. We talk about it in terms of our priorities, our objectives, what we're trying to accomplish. If they're in a position to make that commitment by that time, what that will do for us. and also what it will do for them if it allows some extraordinary recognition to follow. So, and urgency, if it's an urgent need, you present the urgency and you say why it's urgent, some donors will try and cooperate. So as they get to know us better, as they support us more, our time is something that becomes a very important consideration to them. But time begins and ends with the donor, so we have to be deferential to our donors in that respect.